So I'm going to talk, and then we have to go to the supermarket. So we're going to do our chanting with you guys in the car. Like we made sign off and do it in the car because we don't have the data on the phone to stay connected for that. So we've been very busy around here. We have been talking with a real estate agent. We spoke to 2 real estate agents. I don't know how much people are aware of, but we're also recording these talks and putting them on the YouTube, and many other people are watching, so some of this may be repeat information for some people. But the first 2 real estate agents we spoke to said that there was no equity from the property because we still owe so much for the property. So if we sell it, we would just get the money back that we owe for it and not walk away with any money, which of course leaves us in a difficult position for the people and animals living here and that sort of thing. So we found a 3rd real estate agent who specializes in the sale of historic properties. And she believes that there's quite a bit of potential equity, but she wants us to clear out almost everything from the property so she can take a look and make some simple recommendations, like to paint the property and that sort of thing here and there to just make it look a little bit better. And she thinks we could sell it and get some for it. And so we have 3 houses here, and we've had people living here and helping us around the farm and helping us with repairs to the buildings. And we have 3 houses that are fully furnished. And so a lot of things, and so we're trying to get rid of it, but then we also have the need for money, so we're preparing to do an estate sale to sell a lot of these things. And so we are going through generations of things that have been abandoned and left at the property, and things that we brought here, and things that people who came here and lived have abandoned here. We literally have garbage dating back until the 19th century that we're going through everything and asking ourselves, could this have some potential value? Should this be put in the auction, or should this be thrown away? And how do we get rid of this stuff? And so we're slowly going through places, and we had a goal of being done with that process by the first week of February, and it looks like we're way behind schedule on that goal because there's so much stuff. And so hopefully still sometime within February, we'll finish with the task of going through everything and moving things that we want to keep to certain buildings and the things that we want to sell to the main house, so we can have people come there and view it when we do the online estate sale. So bidding will be done online, and people will have an opportunity to come one day and view things before the bidding if they want. And then once they've bought something in the auction, they'll have one day they can come and collect those things. And then the other good piece of that is that whatever does not sell or is not claimed, the auction company is responsible for getting out of here. And so with any luck, we'll get some amount of money from that as well. So it looks promising that at the very least we won't become homeless. We may not go directly to a place where we can continue doing the spiritual teachings. Before we came to this property, and a lot of the reason we got this property is because we were doing the Ayurvedic herbal teas and borrowing land to grow herbs on for those, and it gave us a place to grow. But then also we were offering a class nearly every night of the week, about 6 days out of the week. I had 2 students teaching yoga class for me that I trained them to teach. And then other nights I was doing a class on chanting, or we were doing group meditations or prayer services every day of the week, and the space we were in was simply too small. And so now we've accumulated even more, well, I don't know that we have more necessarily, but if we buy a small place, we could live mortgage-free potentially as we continue to save up money for a proper place. There's no way with the small amount of money that we've raised so far that we'll get from selling the property that we'll buy a suitable place that's big enough to be used to have public events, really. We could buy a house in a neighborhood and at least live and continue to save up money. So in the coming months, as we finish with this phase of getting things ready for the auction, we plan to step up our fundraising efforts to see if people may be able to help us to get to a place where we can go straight to a place where we have the space needed to continue offering classes and prayer services and all that. And also ideally to be able to grow the herbs and to take the farm animals that we have with us here. We found some temporary homes for some of them if needs be, and all that kind of thing. Let's see. But yeah, and you know, as we look at properties, we need some amount of space so that we could build a parking lot and build a temple structure, a teaching center or whatever. But then to get space, if you're in a city, if you have acreage, it's extremely expensive. And then if you're outside of the city, there's not as good of an internet connection, and so there's all kind of ups and downs with different places that we're considering. But you know, we'll see what happens, see what we raise, and see what is in God's will. Whatever happens, it's all for the best. I have faith, and so we'll see as it works out. And so, in recent weeks, we've been very busy. I wasn't here last week, but the week before that, we were thinking about politics. There's been a lot of change in the country with the change of the president, and now they're doing the impeachment process again for the previous president and all that kind of thing. And a lot of people are still thinking a lot about the politics, and they're worried about the state of affairs in the world. And our current president is trying to undo a lot of things that the previous president did. And the previous president tried to undo a lot of things that the previous president had done. And so people get concerned. There are all sorts of people on different sides of the political spectrum. And it's like a roller coaster ride, it seems like, for people, because every few years the person in power changes, and it seems like things are changing. But these are things we really don't have a lot of control over. Even if we vote, even if we work for the political organizations, and we go around passing out signs or talking to people about the candidates that we prefer, especially for something like a presidential election, we have very limited power to affect things. We are here in the state of Virginia, but there's 50 states in America. And you can influence things maybe a little bit in the state where you are, but then there's so many other states, and how do you influence things there? Most people simply are not in a position to influence things on that level that much. Maybe if you have a television show, maybe if you have 1 billion followers on your YouTube or your Instagram or whatever, maybe you can influence things. But most of us, it's something that's out of our hands, out of our control. And so it doesn't make a lot of sense to worry about these things. And that's one reason that I, for a long time, have stayed out of politics. I just avoid all political discussions and political articles and advertisements. Because the way that people think about these things, it's very upsetting. And it just doesn't make any sense to be upset about things that are beyond your control. You can only do what you can do. And a good analogy would be our situation with the move. It's still very uncertain. The one real estate agent has said, oh yeah, I think there could be some equity. Probably you can get this much for the property. But then at the same time, we don't know. The property could sit on the market for 6 months, and we get no offers because people think that we're asking too much for it. And so we may have to bring down the price considerably. We don't know what will happen. It's very uncertain. And I could be sitting here and worrying about it. And you know, this is something that if someone could have a good reason to worry about, you could say, well, this is it. Okay. I don't know where I'll go. But really, I don't choose to do that. I don't sit and worry about it. I don't feel worried about it, honestly. I have a lot of faith that whatever needs to happen next will happen, and it will be a good thing. And it's beyond my control. Well, I can move things to sell to one house. I can put valuable seeming things in that house. and sell those things and see what we get. We can put the house on the market. We'll try to paint it, make it look very nice, and put it on the market. And then, we just sit and pray and wait to see what happens. But it's very similar with the political situation. There's very, very little that we can do. And some people, they get very passionate about specific issues. It may be women's rights. It may be about racial justice. It may be about immigration. Various issues like this. We always have the opportunity, if we're concerned about things like this, that we can do work for those specific causes in our community to try to help the situation a little bit. What we do can have a ripple effect to affect the world all around us, even though we're just working in our small community, our family, our friends, and the community in which we live. It can have an effect. If someone does a really amazing job in their community, people start to talk about it. You start to see newspaper articles, and then a much broader amount of people are becoming aware of it and being influenced by it. But we should be careful in doing work like that we do it in a way that it doesn't make us more angry, more upset. It doesn't throw us out of balance. Really, in that case, maybe you're better to just do something different and try not to think about those things. In certain situations, we have to do certain things. In terms of where I live, I have to do something. I have to move somewhere. I have to do something. In other cases, politics, you don't have to be involved. If it's upsetting to you, it may be easier to step back from that scenario. Same with a career. If you're working a career and your job is extremely stressful, extremely upsetting. Good example, years back, I worked in restaurants for a little while. When I had gotten out of college, I worked in restaurants for a few years because I enjoyed cooking. But I didn't enjoy cooking in restaurants because it was all about production. It was an assembly line, and it was very quick. We need that. 10 minutes ago, we need that. And there's always people yelling, and the people who work in the restaurant were not very spiritual, not very compassionate. There was one guy I remember I had to drive him to the restaurant because he had his license taken away, his driver's license, because when he got his second DUI, driving under the influence, he went to court. He went to his court case drunk and cursed out the judge. And so he had no driver's license, and I had to drive this guy to work, and it was quite a drive. That restaurant was maybe 30 minutes from where I lived, and I had to sit there and listen to this guy the whole way, talking some stupid things. But it was very stressful working in the restaurant, and I left the restaurant thinking, I don't want to cook anymore. So it was not, and bad hours, very stressful work. In a situation like that, you can quit your job if it's not supporting your health, not supporting your happiness, not supporting your spiritual practice. Other things we have to do, it may be part of our duty. But a lot more than people often admit to themselves they can change about their lives to help support their practice. The people you associate with, you can choose to change those people. Your family, you can't choose your family. You have karma connecting you to the family. You can't say, okay, no, I disown my family. Well, people do that. I guess you can do that, but then you'll just be born into the same family with the same set of karmas next time around. There's some interaction that needs to happen there between family members. And there's a duty of the children to parents because children are indebted to parents for this life, for this opportunity to grow spiritually, to enjoy life. Without the parents, it wouldn't be there. And so there's a lot of debt that's owed to our parents. We take it on. We take on the karma of the actions of the parents in the form of genetics. Certain things we can't choose, but many, many things we can choose. If you're on social media, you can choose what you look at. You can block all your friends on Facebook that or maybe not block them. I think you can just hide them from your feed so you don't see their posts. You don't want to hurt people's feelings needlessly. But if you're looking at people's Facebook and it's all about, oh no, the world is ending because something political happened and it's upsetting you, it's depressing you, you can just stop those people's posts from coming up into your feed on Facebook. Little things like this can make a big difference in the way that we feel, and that makes a big difference in what happens in our spiritual practice. That's an important step, I think, that a lot of people in the West are skipping in terms of trying to do the requisite practices, yama and niyama, all these restraints and observances, to restrain yourself from being violent, to restrain yourself from lying, and then to practice contentment, to practice having faith, to do some spiritual practices regularly with discipline, this kind of thing. People are skipping all these basic steps, and there's a lot that people in India do, people in the East in general do as they do a spiritual practice. They'll eat a strict vegetarian diet. They will avoid drugs and other substances as they do it. They'll avoid all kinds of things. And there are many people, they're fasting regularly and all these kind of things. And they have a lot more success in their spiritual practice than people in the West often have, because people in the West just think, oh, well, I can read this mantra in a book and say it a few times one weekend and maybe I'll experience something. But they're not doing anything else. And ultimately, everything that they're doing in their lives is leading to a lot of agitation in their mind and subconscious chatter that prevents them from having any peace and being able to have any experience as they sit doing a spiritual practice. And so that's an important piece, is we've got to try to make ourselves peaceful. One of my gurus used to say, well, if your mind is at peace, you can meditate. If your mind is not at peace, there's no way you're going to be able to meditate. So sitting and trying is probably useless. You ought to just practice not worrying about things, and that might be more helpful. But we have a different idea in the West. We say, oh, well, if you meditate, it will give you peace of mind. Not necessarily so. If you're really meditating, it may bring you into deeper levels of what is unresolved in the subconscious mind. When you sit silently, it should be no surprise that all that stuff you've been avoiding, negative thoughts, negative feelings, start to arise from within, from the subconscious. And it's not necessarily always a peaceful experience. It can be extremely jarring. It can be extremely disturbing. It can be startling if you're not used to it. It can be very, very, very intense. And that's one reason that one of my other gurus has said, when he gets the question, okay, well, I try to meditate, and when I meditate, I fall asleep. And he said, well, if you're falling asleep, you're not meditating. He said, that's your problem, you're not meditating. You need to try to figure out what's going on with that. You need to calm down your mind, and then you need to be able to be having an inner experience. We may not necessarily see the light of the divine immediately. We may see a lot of darkness within. We may feel a lot of feelings. We'll have a memory of an experience we had when we were 5 years old, 12 years old, and have a purging of a lot of emotions around that. And as you sit with that, it can be extremely intense. It can keep you awake at night as you continue to try to process that. And I think that's why my guru had said, well, if you're falling asleep, you're not meditating. But beyond that, when you start to have a spiritual experience in the meditation because you've cleared out enough of that subconscious stuff, then that can be a very intense and beautiful and wonderful experience. Also very stimulating. It's not boring, it's not dull. At first it could be very boring, very dull, but that's because we're trying to overcome the instincts of the mind to turn away. And it takes some time, it takes some effort. It's not always comfortable, it's not always easy. I've noticed as we do the Sangha, we have people that come and listen for the talk. And then when we get done with the talk that I'm giving and we start doing the chanting, a lot of people leave then. Because, it's a process. It's something that's not always easy. And we've got to have more discipline. We've got to dedicate ourselves to an ongoing practice. You can't just do a practice once a month, once a week. To have an ongoing practice of some sort. And it doesn't need to be chanting. It could be walking around mindfully. It could be praying. It could be doing many, many things. It could be doing yoga asanas, yoga stretching or whatever. But to have some kind of practice of mindfulness in your day-to-day life, to do something every day, is very, very useful. You don't have to do the same thing every day necessarily. However, you do build up momentum with that particular practice if you do the same thing every day. The more often you practice a mantra, the more successful you'll be to bring about the energy of the mantra and to experience the results of that particular mantra. With each of these mantras, they talk about the particular potential benefits of the mantra. And of course, if you just say it a couple of times, you may not experience any of it. But when you say it regularly, again and again and again, you start to feel the energy of it and you start to see the effects of it. And so that's a good thing with this Sangha. We've been doing the Sangha like this for years, on and off, harder with COVID, harder without the permits at this property. We've always had relatively small groups at the Sangha because it's an intense chanting practice that we're doing. Other event, a puja where people can sit back and try to dissociate, a class where you're just talking about things, where we talk about Ayurveda and healing remedies for certain conditions or whatever. We've gotten much bigger groups. Even the yoga class, which is fairly meditative, we've gotten much bigger groups. But it's typically been very small groups with this Sangha. And for a time we see certain people come. For several years we'd have certain people come. But we're getting very close to completing our repetitions of this mantra, and I do apologize that we need to go, but we need to go to the grocery store to be able to keep processing things in the house and hopefully get done by sometime within February. We'll see. But we will be chanting with you guys in the car and with you there energetically. And so thanks for joining. We really appreciate it.